Hi guys, how are you guys doing? My name is Yuda Manala and I'm a sophomore in high school. And today we're gonna be talking about diffusion. I took a APHUG last year as a freshman. Today we'll start our lecture. We'll talk about diffusion, all types of diffusions and their causes and effects. So we'll talk first about the Hearth. We'll talk about the two types of diffusions, relocation, expansion, and then we'll talk about the different types of expansion diffusions. And then at the end, we'll talk about the causes, historical causes of diffusion, and the effect of diffusion. Okay, so what is a Hearth? You guys should know that by now. What is a Hearth, guys? Type an answer in the box, in the comment box. What is a Hearth? Because to understand a diffusion, you guys have to know what a Hearth is. A starting point, start place of something, the origin of an idea. The origin of an idea. I like that definition more than the other ones because it makes sense in talking about it. Expansion. Everything else, obviously, all the other answers are correct. Region. Yep, right. So yeah, a Hearth is the origin of an idea, of a phenomena, whatever that is, a culture, a language, a religion, technological innovations. It's an origin of something, where something starts. So yeah, so these are examples of major Hearths in or around in the world. So now the diffusion types, right? There's two main diffusion types, relocation and expansion. We'll talk about relocation first. Relocation diffusion is caused because of the movement of people, right? And it usually weakens the Hearth because people are moving from the Hearth. That's not always the case, but usually it weakens the Hearth because people are moving from the Hearth to another region, right? They're taking this idea, this faith, this belief, whatever that is, they're taking it with them to another place. But we have to think like the relocation diffusion does, like, the number of people adapting that faith or idea or having that idea does not really increase because those are the same amount of people moving to another place. It's the number of people adapting this new idea is not increasing. We have to understand that. And examples of that will be language diffusion. I mean, obviously, like when a lot of people take that same idea into another place, of course it's gonna diffuse from there. But at that point, the relocation diffusion is not increased at this the movement of people from the Hearth to another region. And some examples will be language diffusion. Language diffuses because people migrate, right? People migrate from like, for example, guys, give me examples because I think it's very important to come up with examples when you're talking about that, especially in FRQ. So you guys are writing FRQ. Give me examples of language diffusion or religion diffusion. One of these numbers. Yes, Europeans, Americans. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah, during colonization, right? Um, South America, right? The countries South America never ever actually spoke Spanish, right? They were indigenous people, the Incas and the Aztecs in, I believe it's Colombia. In Colombia, I think that Incas were in Colombia and the Aztecs were in Mexico for sure. Yeah, so they were never actually spoke Spanish, right? But when colonizers, right, from Spain came there, they colonized the area and they enforced their language and religion and culture into the people. And same thing with religion diffusion. Um, I used Christianity as an example of religion diffusion, but that like not every language falls under relocation diffusion. Not every diffusion of every the diffusion of every the diffusion of every language does not fall under relocation. I use Christianity here because it was spread by the movement of people. Missionaries from the Middle East moved, like, if you guys know Paul, right? He was an apostle. He wrote a lot of the New Testament. He contributed a lot to the spread of Christianity to the rest of Europe, to Spain and France. So this is a great example of relocation diffusion. Also pizza introduced to the US, right? Italian immigrants, when they came here, they introduced pizza to this region, to this culture, this whatever growing American culture. It's not American, right? Because it's a melting pot of every other American, but every other culture. Sorry. So we'll move on to. Do you guys have any questions? There's a lot going on the. Yeah, that's right. All the examples you guys mentioned are accurate. Okay. So now to expansion diffusion. Expansion diffusion is different from relocation diffusion. You guys have to understand them. Expansion diffusion, we talked about how in relocation, right, the Hearth kind of weakens because people are moving out, right? In expansion diffusion, the Hearth is still strong, but the number of people adapting this new idea increases, right? More people are adapting this new idea. So the Hearth is still strong and still strong, right? But more people are introduced to this new idea, so it spreads more outward to people, but the Hearth is still strong. Um, some example of that will be food restaurants, right? Food restaurants, they around the world, right? Like for example, McDonald's, right? McDonald's is a very famous, originated here, right, in the U.S., right? But it's spreading out to other parts of the world, and it's adapting differently. It's just the design of the restaurant, the menu is different, right? Depending on where they're located, right? The but the idea, like the McDonald's is still McDonald's, right? But it's no. That I'm confusing the stimulus. Never mind, guys. But the like music, right? Music and restaurants, like they originate in one place and they spread around the world, right? Music is a great example of that because music always originates in a place, and uh, after it's we have okay after it spreads to multiple like regions, right? And eventually, see with diffusion, sometimes music changes too. That's what every time I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking of how it's changing, and we'll talk about that in one of the types of expansion diffusion. And I used Islam here, guys. Why did I use the diffusion of Islam as an example of expansion diffusion? And I used Christianity as an example of relocation diffusion. Can you guys tell me why I did that? What's the difference between two of the religions and how they diffused? And you guys have to think of it. It has to do with the Hearth. So I gave you a hint. Why did I use Islam here as example of expansion diffusion? I couldn't use Christianity, the diffusion of Christianity here. Any ideas, guys? Type some answers in the. Any ideas, guys? Think of the Hearth and how it has changed over time. The Hearth, the region where Islam was found and the region where Christianity is found, which is basically very close, right? It's in the same place. Not the same place, but it's pretty close, right? It's in the Middle East. Any ideas, guys? No ideas? Okay. We'll talk about it. So, you know how we talked about relocation diffusion where we lost control? I keep losing control. Okay. So, in relocation diffusion, right, we talked about how the Hearth weakens, right? In here, Christianity is no in the Middle East. Christianity is no longer strong. The Hearth, where the religion was found, is no longer strong. That's why I was able to use it as an example of relocation diffusion. And here, the Middle East is in expansion diffusion. The Hearth is pretty strong, right? Islam is still is the first religion in the Middle East. That's the first religion that most people practice in the Middle East, and it's still very strong where it is found, right? Because of the way it diffused, the way people introduced it, right? Whatever the historical cause was, but this is the main reason why I use both. I use these two different religions to explain. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I didn't read your answer. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, you guys already answered that. Sorry, I couldn't see the comments for a second. I'm very sorry. Yeah, you guys got it. So yeah, now we'll move on to the different types of expansion diffusions. We have three. You guys have to know: hierarchical diffusion, contagious, and stimulus diffusion. We'll go deeply into all of them in the next slide. So this is a good model good illustration, right, to explain the difference between contagious and hierarchical diffusion. Stimulus is a little bit different, but contagious basically mean it basically spreads everywhere. Like there's no like pattern to its spread. And hierarchical basically is it's basically the opposite. It spreads through a specific pattern. It starts in a place and then it starts in a hearth and then it diffuses downward, right? It's a up to down approach to the diffusion. So hierarchical diffusion, it's a top to down, right? A top to down pattern, right? It starts in a region, right? Like I'm gonna give an example because it's kind of hard to it starts in a region and then it goes down. It spreads downward, right? So for example, I'm gonna talk about social media trends, right? And it's like for example, when companies want to sponsor, right, a product, they usually go to social media famous people, right? Like YouTubers, right? These YouTubers get that product, they try it, and then they make a review about it, right? And then usually their followers will get that product, right? So this is an example of the diffusion, hierarchical diffusion. I think it's a very modern example of that. Fashion, right? Fashion trends are another example. Like for example, trends in Paris, right? Paris is famous for fashion, right? Being fashion industry. So fashion trends in Paris, right, starts there and then it diffuses out, and more people will adapt these trends around the world. But it starts in the place where it's most strong, right? Music, trance, rap, and hip hop, right? It diffuses differently, and same did types of dances, right? They diffuse differently. They start in a specific place in the world, and then they diffuse differently. And they start in the places where this trend is most strong in, right? Most known for. Does that make sense, guys? We have two questions. We'll answer them. If you have any questions right now, type them right now because we'll answer some of the questions here. Oh, we already answered that. Okay, so is relocation diffusion, does amounts of people who speak the language religion increase or stay the same? For relocation, as we said, relocation, well, because well, the religion and language, obviously, like if more people, like if we talked about like we were talking more about like how expansion more people are adapting, but at that point, right, at that point, if we're not talking about a language or a religion, right, at that point when people move from when people, right, when relocation is a movement of people, right, when people physically move from a place to another, right at that point there is no increase in people, right? But obviously as time goes on and these people, more people move from that place, taking that religion or that culture with them, as time progresses, right, these two cultures are going to intermix, and obviously they're going to be influenced from that language, that culture's language and religion. But at that exact point there is no increase because those are the same people moving from there to there, right? But I think if you think of it as like the long-term cultural influence of that movement, of that migration of people, yes, it is. I forgot to press start answering. Okay. Um yeah, so that makes sense. Does that make sense, guys? Another question. If a celebrity advertises a product and then the specific product changes according to the situations, is it still an example of hierarchical diffusion or is it an example of stimulus diffusion? Well, I would say it's a both. The example of both. The advertisement of a celebrity to a product, this is an example of hierarchical diffusion, right? And then if the product, well, I think it depends on how the product is changed. It depends on why the product is changed, right? If it's like It has to be depending on the reasons why the product is changed. If the product is changed because of if a product is changed, like let's say the product is manufactured in the US, right? It was made in the US, and then other countries wanted to make the same product and they wanted to change it, that would be an example of stimulus, right? I always bring the example of like smartphone features, right? Like iPhone and Android, like the competition between them. The iPhone always had the fingerprint, right? The fingerprint on like the lock screen, how you can open your lock screen with pressing on the finger on using your fingerprint to press on the home button. I don't know what it's called, but the but Samsung company, right? They got this idea and they fingerprint ID. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I don't have an iPhone, that's why I'm like I don't know what it's called. Um, I Samsung got that idea and they kind of changed it to make it advanced it, right? And they made the the whole screen in there. I think Samsung S10, I think the 10s, the very recent one they got out, right? They used the whole screen as a thing to be able to open your phone, like to use your fingerprint. So that's an example of the like the stimulus. That's an example of stimulus diffusion, how it changes. The idea is still the same, right? The fingerprint security password is still there, but it's changing. It's changing. Does that make sense? Sorry, that was long. It was hard to explain it. I think stimulus diffusion is okay. So we have two more questions. Let's see, three more questions. Can things be both contagious and something else hierarchical? For example, YouTube videos made by celebrity. Yes, exactly. Like we just talked about. We just talked about it right now. They can be, but I think like yeah, I would say yes because we just see no. Sorry, I was thinking of the question. It doesn't. It doesn't. No, it doesn't. Because if something is contagiously like diffused, it's spreading everywhere, and you can't say it's hierarchical. You can't say that. You can't say that because it's diffusing to everyone. There's no specific people that's gonna diffuse to, and then out of those people are gonna spread to other people, and then no, that doesn't make sense. If you think of the vocabulary word of both of them, does not that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I would say no. In the example of what the other comment was, the change of the product, it was changed for a you it was changed for different reasons. You can't say because it is changed, it's gonna be stimulus. It's changed not because of culture. It's changed because I guess I don't know the recommendations of users or the people. I would say no. I would say no to the answer. Because if you think of the vocabulary word, that makes no sense. They're basically contradicting themselves. If something is contagiously spread, it's spreading everywhere. It cannot spread to like it cannot be hierarchically diffused. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. So can you have something that starts diffusion by relocation and then expands in the new place? So it's diffused. So can you have something that starts diffusion by relocation and then expands? Yeah, so that was so when we were talking about language. Usually language spreads by relocation, right? But like when a lot of people, like let's talk about like the example in the US, right? Get warm here. Example in the US, right? A lot of Spanish speakers from South America, right, are moving up to the US, right? At that point, the number of Spanish speakers are not increasing, right? But as these Spanish speakers interact with the American culture, they bring in their culture. Like at that point, you can say it expands out of there with expansion diffusion. Like after the interaction of these two cultures, the interaction of these two cultures, that's when I think expansion diffusion starts. But at that point, like the relocation diffusion, nothing increases because these Spanish speakers are just moving from one place to another. There's no any increase in the number of people. I hope that makes sense. Oh, we're done with the questions. Okay. I hope that makes sense, guys. If it doesn't make sense, just tell me in the comments. Okay. So we talked about hierarchical, right? We'll move on to the next diffusion words. Okay. So contagious, yeah, as we talked about it in the questions, contagious. It's a rapid spread of an idea everywhere. There is no pattern. It spreads everywhere. And what is a great example of that? What's a better example of COVID-19, right? Virus, what's a better example than that? It's spreading, like, it doesn't know an ethnicity or a culture or a language or an elite group of people. It spreads everywhere. Diseases, obviously, diseases are the great example of that because they spread everywhere. And viral videos still on the internet. That's another example too. They once they're spread, they're spread. Like there's no pattern that they follow. Yeah. Contagious diffusion is very easy, I think, to understand. I think if you guys just make sure to know the vocabulary words. If you know the vocabulary words and you have already if you know like two of these examples, writing a FRQs will be easy if you know what they're talking about. Just no vocabs, no vocabs, no vocabs. Stimulus diffusion. Stimulus diffusion is just a little bit harder one to understand. Stimulus diffusion is when a phenomenon is spread, and as it is spreading, it changes. It's altered because of where it's spreading, because of the culture. Sorry. It's changing because of the culture of where it's spreading, right? So I would say a great example of that. I think this example is in every APHUG textbook. McDonald's restaurant, right? I'm gonna show you a next slide. Yeah, this is the slide of it. So McDonald's, the restaurant, right? It's everywhere. It's international, right? But you see it how the menu changes, right? The menu changes. Like for example, in India, they're not gonna have beef burgers, right? Because Indians, like the culture, right? They believe that cows are sacred, so you're not supposed to kill. Yeah, because of the Hindu religion, they believe that the cows are sacred. So you're not like people are not gonna eat beef. There is no point to have McDonald's serving beef burgers, right? Steaks to the Indians in there, right, in that region, because they're not culturally it's not accepted. So its menus changes depending on the culture, and this is a great example of stimulus. We see how the identity of the idea is kept, right? It's still McDonald's, it's still the same restaurant, it's owned by the same people, but it's run differently. The menu is changed. The design of the restaurant might change, right? The way it looks from the outside. So yeah, yoga practice too. This is an interesting one because yoga was found in India. In India, I believe. It's found in India and it has spread everywhere, right? And the reason why it is practiced in other parts of the world is different than the reason why it was found in India, right? The reason is different, but the idea is still there. The idea of yoga, how it's practiced, right? It's still there. It's still there. It's still there, that makes sense. Technology and writing systems. Do writing systems change? This is a hard one because you have to have cultural cultural intermixing of cultures and different languages to have changes in writing systems. But influence of languages and writing systems of languages by other cultures, that's still example of stimulus diffusion because it's changing, but it's still the same. It's being influenced by this new culture. I would say Spanglish, but Spanglish is not a writing system. Spanglish, like the no, Spanglish is not a no, it's no. Spanglish is an example of stimulus diffusion. It doesn't make sense because it's a forget guys, that's not an example. That doesn't make sense. And the smartphone features, right? We talked about the fingerprint, right? The fingerprint, how companies adapt these new features by the competitive competitive, right? Competitive, like other competitive companies, and they basically make that feature better. They advance, right? They add other features to it, combine it to produce other like better product. But the fingerprint idea is still there. You need your fingerprint, right? Your fingerprint of your index to open that device. So the idea is still there. Does that make sense, guys? I think that makes sense. Can you guys think of other stimulus diffusion examples? Because it's very hard. Can you guys come up with something? We can chat about it. Anything, guys? Anything in the chat? We have Pidgin languages and Creole languages. See, that was I was thinking of Spanglish too. I couldn't. Well, Pidgin languages are like modified languages, right? So I would say, yeah, Pidgin languages, they can be an example of stimulus diffusion. I would say, because the language is still there, but it's modified. But at the same time, it's like influenced by the other the other culture. So it's like a mix. It's well, yeah. I would, because it makes sense. It makes sense because yeah, it makes sense because this Pidgin language is changed, but the culture, the main language is changed, right? To get to the Pidgin language, but it's influenced by the culture. So that makes it makes sense. It's the same example as McDonald's, how the McDonald's changes because of the influence of the culture. So we have, let me see, Indian restaurants. Yeah, of course. Yeah, Chinese porcelain too. That's a great explanation. That Chinese porcelain is another example of how these Europeans got that idea, right? The idea of how to make it, the Chinese how to make porcelain, but they had their own like touch to it, their own cultural effect on it to produce it. We have one question. In stimulus diffusion, a trend changes and redirectalization is basically changing a trend. So are they basically same thing? I do not know what redirectalization is. Stimulus diffusion, a trend changes and it's basically changing a trend. Well, trend always changes, so you can't. No, I don't say no, because trends they're trends because they change, right? They change over time. No, 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 no. I would say no. Because trends are always changing, and they're just known for changing. There's nothing that's kept. If you think of a specific trend, yes, but a generalization of trends changing is not an example of stimulus diffusion, because they're not keeping their identity. There's nothing that's kept in the trend that's completely changing. If you think of specific trends, I would say yes, it works, but in that kind of generalization, no, it does not. Okay, so we will move on to, we talked about the menu, and then we'll talk about historical causes of diffusion. So colonialism and imperialism is, I guess, one of the two main historical causes of diffusion, right? Colonizing. European people coming in a foreign land, taking the land and forcing their culture into these new natives people, right? These natives people. So that's the exact example of diffusion of culture and language and religion, right? In the Spanish Inquisition, right? Um, in we just talked about it, right? In Spain, how Spain colonized the North American countries, right? So, Central and North American countries, and how with their what is it, Spanish Inquisition, right? They forced their religion, their culture, their beliefs into to the people, to the native people, the Incas and the Aztecs. So to basically erase all this their culture. They destroyed most of their cultural landscapes and the things, their religion, whatever their faith was. They forced Spanish onto them, right? Most South Americans speak Spanish because of this colonization, colonialism, because of colonialism. Sorry, guys. And imperialism is the same thing. It's the difference between colonialism and imperialism. Colonialism was in the 1700s, and it was basically taking like kind of complete control over the land. Imperialism was in the 1800s, but it was still done by Europeans, and it was mostly to get resources and get control of the country's economy and land, and and obviously trade. Okay, obviously trade is a good example of a historical trade has always happened around the world, right? Um, Trade is a cause of diffusion, right? Because no. Trade is a cause of diffusion. Yeah, trade is a cause of diffusion because when people interact from different cultures, these new ideas in the culture is spread to other cultures, and they're adapted depending on the situation. We have one question we will answer. Would the internet and Wi-Fi be a modern cause of diffusion? Definitely. Because the advances of technology make it so much easier to communicate, right? To spread these ideas, right? This is a great example, a modern example of causative diffusion. This fast transportation, the advances of transportation, airplanes, right? We had railroads in the Industrial Revolution, and now we had advanced to the airplanes. Communication is becoming faster and faster, and communication and diffusion of ideas becomes faster with that, with the increase in communication. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is a map of the British Empire. Look how vast it is. Look how vast it is, right? Like it's a lot of like it's in North America. Sorry, Africa, right? There's a lot of British colonized countries in Africa, and a lot of those countries until today um speak very good English, very good English because of this influence. For example, Egypt, like I know Egypt is a Muslim country and it speaks most their official language I think is Arabic, but they speak very well English because of this colonial because of the British colonies in there, right? And which trade too, right? The Indian trades, right? The British colonies in India were forced to trade and buy only products from their colonizer, right, from Britain. So this is an example of, I guess, forced trade, right? And and Indians were forced to introduce to their society these new English products, whatever they were, right? We have another question. What are some advantages and disadvantages of diffusion? Well, this is a great example of disadvantages, right? The forced diffusion, and like oppression, like imperialism and colonialism underline oppression, right? The forced diffusion that's not gonna cause an improvement and a progress in society is a disadvantage of diffusion, right? But diffusion of like technological ideas and advances, right? This is a great example of diffusion, right? Because it causes the progression of a society and a country. Just think of is this historical event make causing sorry, is this historical event causing a culture to progress or to go back, right? We see a lot of African American countries suffering right now because of the oppression they had to go through these times, colonialism and imperialism. All their natural resources were taken, right? and they were left with nothing, even in addition to the slave trade, right? Slave trade to the North Americans, to the America, sorry. Uh, do countries that have been colonized tend to be more developed? Well, I would let you guys answer that. We look if you just look at the graph, look at the map we looked at, right? Are these countries developed? Like, are they developed? Is India is well, India is developing, but it's not that much developed. If you look at African countries, most of the countries are poor right now. They're suffering. They're one of the, I think, second world countries. They're like the only countries that are still in the second phase of the transitional model. So definitely not because of this oppression. Because colonialism and imperialism, it, their main reason was to benefit the mother country, the colonizer, basically European countries. That's I would say definitely not. Okay, so one more slide. Are we done? Are we not done? Let me see. I think we have one more slide. Let me look at the, okay, yeah. So effects of cultural diffusion. Now we're gonna be talking about diffusion of culture, right? So these are mostly vocabulary words you guys have to know for the test. So be familiar with them. Some of them are self-explanatory. Most of you guys are familiar with them. Some of them are not. So we'll go through them. So some effects of cultural diffusion, assimilation, right? So assimilation is basically like leaving your old culture and adapting this new culture, right? Becoming American. This is an example of that. Whatever that means, whatever becoming American means, right? So for example, if let's see, if a family, right, a Spanish speaking family from a Mexican family, right, moves from Mexico to the US, right? And they assimilate. If their children assimilate, that means they're no longer gonna speak Spanish. They're basically gonna speak mostly English, and they're not gonna keep their traditions and cultural whatever they do, right? Because they're becoming Americans. But the thing is, the problem is that becoming American, what does that even mean? What is American culture, right? Because American culture is a melting pot of different cultures and ethnicities. So it's not one specific thing. Like it's a socially constructed thing. So depending on who you ask, they will tell you differently about what American culture is. Well, that's an example in American culture, right? But if you go to other cultures, it's not really that much diverse. Like Japan and Korea, I think they're not very diverse. So this example works better in those countries, those regions of the world. Syncretism. Syncretism is basically the mixing of two cultures to form something new. Like the the mixing of two faiths. I think it's Sikhism. I don't know if the example just took my words for it, but I think Sikhism is a religion practiced in India where I think they mixed like Islamic um like teachings and Christian teachings to come up with this like new religion. Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, don't take that. Okay, I'll take that back. It's not Sikhism. It's a religion in Asia. I'm pretty sure, but I don't remember the name of it. I'm very sorry. But it's basically this mixing of two new ideas to form a new one. So it's a formation of a new idea. So the old stuff, the old ideas are not usually kept. Like a lot of them are not kept because of the inner mixing. But this is different than uh, culturalization. Culturalization is the mixing of new and old, right? So it's basically when, like the Spanish boy, right? The Spanish boy would move from Mexico to the US. He would basically still keep his traditions and his language, but he will try to like adapt to the new culture. Like he would also keep both cultures, American cultures and Spanish cultures. He would probably speak Spanish with his parents, right? But he would basically maybe celebrate 4th of July. This is an example of American culture celebrating 4th of July. Does that make sense, guys? And multiculturalism is basically the existence of multiple cultures. And the USA is a great example of that. We have so many cultures in here. We have so many countries because this country was built on immigrants, right, from different cultures, European countries, South Americans, from the Asian continents, Middle East, whatever that is. And cultural resistance is another effect of cultural diffusion. Cultural resistance is basically the rejection of the spread of a specific culture. And I think a modern example of that would be Islamophobia, which basically the definition of that means fears of Muslims or of Islam, right? This idea of whatever. I don't want to go into anything deeper. The rejection of the of Muslims in the US because of whatever causes it is, because of their religion, because of their beliefs. But this is an example of cultural resistance. Cultural resistance because the culture is not being accepted, into the American culture or this new culture. Okay, so we're done, I think. Let me see if we're done or not. I think we're done, yeah. We answered some of the questions we're finished with the questions. Difference between assimilation and acculturation. Okay, so differences between assimilation and acculturation. Assimilation is basically losing your old culture, like neglecting it, right? Just adapting this new culture. Like your old culture is not gonna affect you, like the way you behave. But acculturation is using like it's mixing both your old culture and this new culture you're being introduced to. So the Spanish boy will still speak what we talked about. Will still maybe eat like traditional like maybe Mexican dishes, but maybe like we talked about. I think being American, like what if being American celebrating 4th of July? That always comes to my mind. But maybe he would celebrate 4th of July, right? It's American culture, and he's living in America, so he's gonna adapt them American cultures, but he's not gonna leave his culture away. He's not gonna totally like get rid of his culture. That's the difference between assimilation and acculturation. Okay, second question. Okay, acculturation versus syncretism. Okay, so the difference between syncretism, we said the mixing of two cultures, right? But a new culture is formed. A new idea comes out of this mixing of these two ideas. But culturalization, there is no new thing that comes out. It's the mixing. There is no new idea that comes out. They call it integration. You basically blend into the society, but there is no a new culture, a new faith that comes out of it. I hope that makes sense. Because syncretism is basically the forming of new thing, of a new idea because of this mix of this clashes between cultures. I hope that answers it. Okay, one more question. Is syncretism the idea of adapt or die, like Buddhism? What do you mean adapt or die? Like, I don't get the question. What does adapt and die mean? You mean like you have to accept it? Like you have to accept it? Can you clarify that? Forced conversion. Okay, okay. Um, I honestly, I think not really. No, I don't think so. Because this is a generalization. It's not a thing. Like I would say no because you have depending on the example you're giving, right? But no, because you're making a generalization here. It does not mean the forming of new idea, like this forming of new, like I, I don't know, religion, idea, faith. That's not always going to be applied because you're making a generalization here. But at specific examples, yes, I would say yes. But you're making a generalization here, so no. The answer is no to this question. Obviously, no, because we're actually just like defining the term, but that term can change depending on the situation. Like no, the term doesn't change. Sorry, they're just defining the terms, right? But these terms can be applied differently depending on the situations. Like syncretism can be applied different depending on the society, right, and their beliefs. Like yes, it can be adapt or die. kind of situation. But we're making generalization, so I would say no. So we are done with today. Let me see. We can go to the closing slides. If you have any questions, guys, type them down in the ask questions. And if you guys want a specific, okay, so don't forget to follow us to show up to these weekly streams. If you're taking any of the other AP classes, we have Mondays we have math and English, Tuesday social sciences, and then Wednesday science, and then Thursday's history. And then don't forget to follow us on Think Fivable at Twitter. I mean, don't forget to follow us at Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at Think Fivable. And we have one more question we'll answer. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, we will have streams. I will be streaming usually next, like, we usually stream on Thursdays, and then we're gonna have on Tuesday. No, we're streaming on Tuesday. Sorry, these weekly streams are on Tuesday. These are basically gonna be focused on the content of the test, on the content of the test. But we will have review sessions on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time, I believe. Check the calendar, guys. Everything is on Fiveable, the website. So yeah, and if you guys have anything you guys want to more focus on, you can type those down to work on during the practice sessions. Yeah, if that makes sense. Okay. So thank you guys. Thank you for showing up. And I will see you soon. Stay healthy and safe. For the FRQ practice, sorry guys, for the FRQ practice, I'm just reading the comments. For the FRQ practices, I think there should be some FRQ practices during the review sessions. I'm not sure because I'm not doing review sessions, but whoever is doing them, you guys can talk with them. And I'm pretty sure they're doing them because doing FRQs is the best way to practice because you have to know what's going on and how to answer it and different ways you can approach the problem. So yeah, I hope that was helpful, guys, and see you next week. Stay healthy and safe. Bye.